Welcome to the joint webinar of Kinaxis and 4Flow. My name is Mark. I have been with 4Flow for 12 years. I'm the head of the digital practice and I'm responsible for major supply chain transformations. Just one organizational thing. If you have a question, please type in your question in the question box. We will answer them later. I think this situation you know very well. The sales guy meets the production planner and the sales guy is very enthusiastic and he's saying, hey, great, we have great chances. We can sell 20% more of our products than we have planned before. The production guy gets scared and he's saying, I have to do the replanning. So I have to go back to my team and then you will get the result in a buffer meeting. Then the purchasing guy coming in and says, oh yes, please give me the input of your plan. I have to check with my suppliers, with the agreements, and you know we have very long lead times, we have to consider this. Then the supply chain management guy comes in and he's saying, oh, stop guys, you know we are already now highly utilized, and if we increase more sales and output, our service level will go down and we will risk our global business. This situation describes that the impact of a change in the supply chain, in this time increase of demand, is not really transparent. The responsible persons are still stuck in their silos, stuck in their functions. They are doing the planning in a sequence. First, the sales people do their sales planning, giving the input to the production people. They do their planning. Then they give the input to the purchasing people. They do their planning. Maybe at the end it doesn't work out. They start from new again. All this takes very long. This is very slow and it's not flexible at all to react on market changes. With concurrent planning, you will overcome all the drawbacks of sequence planning. Let me explain you the concept of concurrent planning using these gear wheels. With concurrent planning, you see immediately the consequences. If there's somewhere in the supply chain a change, you see it immediately. Let's assume, for example, this wheel stands for demand planning, this wheel stands for production planning, this for inventory planning, and this for purchasing, and there's maybe still more wheels. For example, the demand is changing. Let's turn the demand wheel. Then we see immediately that, for example, capacities are on the limit, production orders cannot be fulfilled. We see immediately which customer orders can be not fulfilled, what are the delays, how many of the material has to be ordered additionally from the supplier to have a feasible plan. But there is not just a concurrent view on the supply chain, also the planning itself is done in a concurrent mode. For example, you do a new production plan. Let's turn the production wheel. So then you see again immediately with your plan the consequences on demand, on inventory, and also on, for example, on purchase. So, and you do this kind of planning in collaboration with all relevant parties in the supply chain. You define end-to-end planning scenarios. You evaluate each of all the scenarios. You evaluate the impact on the financial figures like EBIT and cost and choose the best one and bring it to execution. To make concurrent planning happen, you need three things. You need concurrent processes, you need a concurrent operating model, and you need the corresponding IT system you will see later. Now, let's start with the discussion with the experts. Here on my left, it's Jörg, partner and co-founder of 4Flow. an outstanding expert in the automotive industry. On the right hand side, Leonard, VP at 4Flow, an expert for FMCG and retail. So let's first ask Jörg. Jörg, what are the current challenges for the automotive industry in the context of supply chain planning?
I think for the last decade we have seen a very high degree of uncertainty, volatility and complexity in the automotive industry. And obviously recently we had a significant demand drop and partly recovery due to the pandemic. We have changing customer behavior also due to e-mobility transformation. We have new players in the market, as we all know here in Berlin, for example. We have upcoming CO2 restrictions and many more. So these affects definitely the OEMs, their supply networks, but also the complex inbound networks and the first and second tier suppliers. But what challenges do we see for supply chain planning in this context? To set up a flexible production and supplier footprint, serving volatile market scenarios, obviously, a complex midterm planning with a drill down on features and materials, and on short-term basis, a frequent disruptions in the supply chain causing very often firefighting and short-term measures. So a fast planning in scenarios for this long-term, mid-term and short-term horizon would really solve a lot of problems and would be of a very great benefit for all in the supply chain. Ideally, all these scenarios are based on the single planning database, which very often is called the single point of truth. I think that would be the main issue.
Yeah. Thanks. Now let's come to you, Leonard. What are the main challenges in context of supply chain planning for FMCG right now? What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey this year. So what we see on the market for FMCG and retail companies is a couple of challenges. First of all, a very significant one is the changes in consumer behavior, where a clear shift from a classical stationary supply chain to a more omni-channel e-commerce driven supply chain, which impacts retail as well as FMCG companies there. That's the outbound side of things. On an inbound side, the supply chain has been set up on an international scale, a lot of collaboration with international suppliers, international distribution centers. That's nothing new. However, what we see is that the disruption in the global supply chains in the international markets are really impacting and putting a challenge on FMCG companies to ensure product availability to be able to serve their customers. Right, so that it's similar as in automotive. The global supply chains are now, with all the risk that has been accepted in the past, are really putting a headache on everyone's desk right now. So there's a third one, which is the margin pressure. Despite the market, interestingly, being recovered in for a lot of companies, right? So really sales volumes are close to where they were before. What we see is that companies are still pushing for a better margin position. And obviously that impacts the supply chain. With all of the volatility, with all of the interruptions, making sure that we can still reduce costs inside of the supply chain. And last, but definitely for me not least, and Jörg mentioned it for the OEMs as well, the CO2, the push to a more, let's say, sustainable environment and sustainable business setup, where we have a lot of companies that want to deliver sustainable products and are looking to create transparency about CO2 emissions along the overall supply chain, as well as optimize the CO2 footprint. So having said that, Jörg discussed it or mentioned it as the one point of truth, right? One terminology that I like a lot is this playground logic. So what would concurrent planning really, or why does concurrent planning currently help for the customers that have implemented it? They have the option to play around, to see impacts of the supply chain, and to really have a playground and simulate, right? And that's what we see this year. as the core impact in the FMCG and retail industry.
Okay. Thanks, Leonard. So very, very, very interesting. So, Jörg, where do you see is the current maturity of supply chain planning in the automotive industry?
I think it's currently quite okay, sure, varying from one company to the other. The most companies have basically implemented a standard planning processes and created a quite okay database behind that. This basically is good. All the processes are there. That is a big step forward. But I would like to highlight one point where I think the companies could even go a little bit further. If we apply the concepts of a continuous change within supply chain planning of automotive OEMs, then we require more information faster. That was the point Leonard mentioned before with this playground. I mean, if you would like to play around, then you have to get all the things you have to combine, and therefore you need the information much faster. And there the industry is not today, I would say. Yeah? So we need to know the impact of a certain event and what needs to be done on a short-term, mid-term, and also long-term basis. Yeah? We need to know the impact for our company, but ideally also for the supply side. Yeah? And we have to share this information and to have a common database and to share it basically via a platform, ideally. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Leonard, where do you see the maturity degree for the FMCG companies?
So, I mean, IBP is nothing new, right? There has been in place in the consumer goods industry for quite a while. Also the software support of the IBP processes. However, what really a trend that we see and where maturity still has some option to develop, I would call it, is in the collaborative side. Right? We know very well from the automotive industry that the collaboration between OEMs, tier ones have been intense in the past, and I think this is the next steps that we also see in the consumer goods and retail market. Supply chain partners working together, right? So really the retailers, the FMCG companies, the suppliers of the FMCG companies, contract manufacturers, carriers inside of the global network, really make sure that we have them all in one system, in one landscape, so that we can enable concurrent planning, which goes not only in the software direction, but also in an organizational question, right?
Thanks, man. So now the last question. So we learned about concurrent planning, what it is. If we would apply this in the last consequence for automotive companies, what do you think would be the main benefit for them?
Yeah, I would say the main benefit is, and to keep in mind what is very important, the automotive supply chain are tremendously complex. So a concurrent planning in this environment would enable the OEMs to have an end-to-end planning evaluation in a much shorter time than before. And as Leonard said before, this playing around with different options is only possible if you know the results from these different scenarios very fast. And this will enabling them to invest in the right assets at the right time and also making the right production and supply chain decisions. So basically, I would say a planning process which is still sequenced is not that fast as it should be, and they are too long today. So I would say speed could basically be improved.
So, and Leonard, last question to you, and how it is for the FMCG customer. Where do you think is the main benefit of concurrent planning?
I would see it at the end in the customer satisfaction, right? Even though it's the supply chain, which is the back end, which is responsible for delivering product on time in the right place, with the concurrent planning, considering, okay, do we have interruptions in our inbound supply chains, in our outbound supply chains, and reacting on these information fast allows a way better availability of material and allows the supply chain to counteract better, right, on short-term deviations as well as on long-term deviations. And at the end of the day, it's about having the product there so that the customer can be fulfilled.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Jörg. Let's close the expert discussion and let's go to the next point. It's about technology. We learned that it's very important enabling concurrent planning. So I kindly refer to Kinaxis, who will give us more insights about the technology.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Hans-Jörg, if you can just throw up the slides, that'd be great.
Yep.
Good. So hopefully you can all see the slides, and thank you for attending the session this afternoon, and thank you to the 4Flow team for that fantastic introduction and discussion. Before I do hand over to Hans-Georg and my colleague Fraser, I wanted to just set the scene on Kinaxis as a company and organization. And really, there was the best way to do that is the use of this slide in front of you. So the three key points that come out pretty loud and clear on the bottom of this slide. Kinaxis is a 30-year-old organization, but our whole focus and mission is about allowing supply chains and organizations with rich and often complex supply chains to know sooner, act faster, and reduce waste. I think we heard both Jörg and Leonard talk about CO2 emissions, particularly in the automotive space, but these challenges are coming to other industries as well. And what you'll learn in this next segment, the next 10-15 minutes, is really all about how to understand the problem sooner, how to collaborate quicker, how to run multiple simulations and scenarios, and the impact of that, how to reduce waste. And that waste could come in the form of time, could come in the form of inventory, multiple different elements to waste. But let me hand it over to Hans-Georg, and let's take you through that. And again, thank you for your time and your attention. Much appreciated. Hans-Georg, over to you.
Thank you, Fergus. So let's look into the technology aspect of things. I'm going to pick up on a number of key points that came out of the expert discussion here. So we learned about that the consecutive, sequential, and cascaded way of running through individual processes as part of IBP or SNOP is no longer making the cut in these times of high volatility and almost daily changing business conditions. Very practical. If you take, for example, in any given organization, a week each for demand planning, supply planning, inventory planning, and capacity planning, that means it's a 30 days time span, which also means once you are through successfully and present back the combined results to your management team, it's the underlying data is already 30 days old. Hey, in these times, world changes about 10 times during a month. So what is it really worth? So in contrast to that, if we look at the concept of concurrent planning, the answer is immediately there. Yes, you can still work along the lines of milestones to follow a structured process. But the key point really is to have the capability to run ad hoc scenarios at any point in time, compare these and see the immediate impact on every other aspect of the organization. And this is a fundamental change in the way planning is being performed. And this is due to the unique platform technology that Kinaxis developed over the last 2 decades. Very early on, we had seen that a general purpose database is not making the cut, and it's not allowing with its performance the concurrent planning process. So therefore we had to start from scratch and developed not only a in-memory database but also a system architecture that supports this very unique use cases of planning in a concurrent way. Now, if we look at how the platform actually can be so fast to come back within seconds or minutes with the result of different scenarios, Let's take an analogy here with the human brain. So taking you through some very simple examples here, no worries. So 4 by 4, easy one, that's 16. Now, if there's a variation of that formula, it's 4 by 4 plus 4, well, that's an easy one, 2, that's 20. If there's another variation, let's call this another scenario, the result here is 18. So how can we be so fast as human beings? Because we look at the differences between the individual lines and we look at only the difference. A computer, a traditional computer, would go from left to right and would do the full computation. Now, we as human beings, we see the difference between line 1 and line 2. Line 2 is a plus 4. So we take the result of line 1, which is 16, add 4, and we are at 20, the result. Same for the line number 3. The only difference is minus 2 compared to the previous line. So we take the 20, minus 2 is 18. And with the always on planning engine built into the Kinaxis solution called Rapid Response, we are in fact mimicking the way human brain works with that regard to look at delta changes and not going through all and every single calculation, which can take forever. If the scale is high and the complexity is high. You know that from your runtimes of your MRP system, where a weekend can be a constraint actually to get through. Now, this is not the work concurrency works, and that's how we are revolutionizing planning. And from a context and process perspective, we are also aligning the short-term, mid-term, and long-term planning aka SNOP and SNOE into one single platform using the same data model and using the same information. So the connection between the different time horizons as well as between operational planning challenges and strategic planning challenges become seamless. Now let's look into this in action. And let me hand over at this point to my colleague Fraser here, who will walk you through a short demo of rapid response control tower and collaboration. Fraser, whenever you're ready, up to you.
Rapid Response is an always-on concurrent supply chain planning platform. What that means is if any planner makes a change to demand or supply, or the supply chain data itself changes, Rapid Response will instantly calculate the impact of that change on the end-to-end supply chain. In this demonstration, we're going to have a supplier delay its planned shipments because of a supply disruption, and we will see the impact of that on our production plans and also on our ability to meet service levels on our forecast customer orders. We will also see how a planner can run unlimited what-if scenarios at any time to test any resolution or changes in the network. We will further see how Rapid Response can automatically simulate a variety of playbooks in real time to test different resolutions, and it will score those playbooks with corporate and financial metrics, allowing the planner to focus on selecting the right course of action and collaborate with their supply chain peers and stakeholders to get consensus on that course of action and execute that decision quickly. So let's move into Rapid Response. Our landing page is typically
a configurable dashboard that has been designed to present relevant supply chain data and visualizations to the planner for their specific planning role and scope of control. In this control tower example, we're looking at the forecast revenue over the next 12 weeks generated by the unconstrained demand plan. Now we can visualize the physical supply chain in a geomap view. For example, we can see our Paris customer is forecast to contribute $300 million of order revenue over the next 3 months. We can also summarize those projected revenues by category and display that in a more traditional graph view. And this particular control tower provides visibility of the various production sites or plants that we have in this network and an indication of their level of utilization over the planning horizon. So what happens if our supply or demand data or the network changes? In our supply disruption example, we have an issue at one of our suppliers and we're getting a notification of the delayed supply of key components or raw materials into one of our plants. So I'm going to simulate that with a delay in the scheduled receipt dates. We can now see that the original delivery dates for these scheduled receipts have been updated to a later date of 27th of July because of this plant fire in our suppliers' network. We have this delay in the inbound deliveries to our plant. If we return to our control tower, as rapid response is always on, as soon as a change occurs, rapid response will instantly calculate the impact on the end-to-end network. And in this case, we can see various warning signs and exceptions highlighted in our control tower dashboard. In our message center, we have an alert that's been triggered, which has generated a message for the planner. Rapid Response Automated Monitoring Service has detected component shortages that will impact customer deliveries caused by delays in the master production schedule. The alert and the message also provides a link to the underlying data that's triggered the alert. We can already see in our lower graph that we now have forecast component shortages. For example, we're now short 326,000 units of component D2712 at site, our subcontract manufacturing site E3002. I can drill from this graph into the detailed data below. What this shows us is the component part, and we can see how we've got a gap in the supply in June and July before a large supply comes in late on the 27th of July. But Rapid Response is also showing us that this delay in the component part is delaying the production of our semi-finished good at our subcontract location, which in turn is delaying the production of the finished good, the P2000, in our own plant. If we return to our dashboard, we also see that our manufacturing sites have now got a red warning sign on them. And if we drill into this, we can see it's one of our packaging lines, and Rapid Response is telling us that it's moved into an overload situation on the 3rd of August. If I drill into the Constraints Manager, we can see that this packaging or production line has an available capacity of 70,000 units per week. On the 3rd of August, however, Rapid Response needs to produce 110,000 units in order to meet that future forecast demand. But the line doesn't have the capacity. So we can see in the lower graph how this excess load is actually being postponed to the later weeks in August. It can't produce in the earlier weeks, even though it has spare capacity, because it doesn't have the delayed component or subsequent semi-finished goods available to complete the finished good production at our plant. Returning to our control tower, we can now see our geomap is highlighting that we have forecast future revenue orders at risk across our customer base due to that delayed inbound supply and subsequent production. If we review our Paris customer again, we can now see that nearly $14 million of forecast orders are at risk of being delivered late or potentially lost at this location. If we move to the category summary, there is a total of $82 million worth of forecast order revenue at risk in this first category. Again, we can drill into the detail behind these highlighted service failure risks. This takes us to our demand order analysis workbook, which shows both actual orders in the system and forecast orders created by the consensus forecast. Here I've filtered on our Paris customer C301, and there is a forecast order for 1,000 units with a due date of the 17th of August, and Rapid Response is calculating an available date of the 27th of August. So it's effectively 8 days late. If we focus on this order, we can visualize how that order is replenished and supplied back through the end-to-end supply chain and back into the bill of materials. So we have a need quantity of 1,077 due on the 17th of August. And that generates a replenishment order or transfer order from our regional distribution center, which in turn is generating an order back to our central distribution center, which is generating a works or production order at our plant. In turn, this is driving an order for the semi-finished good, this D2701, which is made at a subcontracted manufacturing location, which is driving purchase orders for the raw materials or components from our various suppliers. So Rapid Response provides full end-to-end visibility and will peg or link specific customer and product demand to specific component and semi-finished good supplies back in the supply chain. Crucially, Rapid Response is also showing us the source of the lateness by highlighting yellow or red back through the supply chain network to the source of the issue, which is this particular supplier of this raw material. Let's drill into the planning sheet for this component product at this location. The planning sheet gives us a graphical view of the flow and balance of this particular product component, D2712, through this particular site, the E3002, our subcontract manufacturing location. If we review our scheduled receipts at this location, we can see the original due dates for the purchase orders and there's the original due dates and the new delayed available dates of the 27th of July. If we return to the horizontal grid view, we can see the available supply of this product in early June, and then a gap developing due to the delay before a big spike of late supply on the 27th of July. This causes a negative inventory position to develop, which we can see in the graph and within the inventory balance below, as demand for the component lower in the supply chain continues throughout the time horizon. When we look at alternative supply sources, we actually have the opportunity to source this product from another supplier. Rapid Response allows any planner to create a what-if scenario at any time to simulate or test any particular resolution anywhere in the supply chain. So I'm going to create a new scenario. Based off our live data plan, we'll call this alternate supplier. And this produces a private sandbox environment or a digital twin of the supply chain in which I can now test any changes or resolutions. So let's turn on the alternative supplier by changing its status from disabled to buy. We'll also change the priority so that rapid response only considers this supply option when the other supplier isn't available. As I hit save, rapid response automatically calculates the impact of that new supply availability across the global supply chain, considering its alternate lead times and costs, and it will also in real time and instantly regenerate all of our demand, supply and distribution plans with the impact of those changes. So at this location we can see that the negative inventory balance has almost disappeared. If we go to the horizontal grid view, we can see that rapid response is now generating new planned orders on that new supplier earlier in July, which is resolving much of the supply shortage from the other supplier. When we move back to our demand order analysis, and we now look at our customer order in Paris, we can see that the yellow or the red or the orange warning denoting lateness through the supply chain has now gone. It is actually now delivered on time because we have secured a new supply route for the delayed components that go into that semi-finished product and into the finished product. Instead of relying on the planner to run what-if scenarios every time there is an issue, we can have rapid response automatically consider alternative playbooks or strategies as supply and demand changes, and alternatively present the planner with scored resolution options for them to consider. In this instance, rapid response is also considering 3 further demand priority options that allocate the available supply to our customers according to different priorities, as well as the alternate supply scenario. A planner can compare and review these financial and operational scores for each playbook or scenario in a scorecard. In this particular example, we can see the alternate supply scenario gets a 120% score versus against the life plan, primarily because it's reducing the amount of late revenue. The other demand priority allocation scenarios do deliver higher gross margin results, but they are scored poorly overall as they don't deal with the late revenue arising from the delayed supply. So in this instance, rapid response is recommending what course of action the planner should take. The planner can now focus on collaborating with their peers in the supply chain to get consensus on a course of action to resolve the supply chain disruption. So we're going to create a collaboration, and we create a new collaboration, and when we do that, it captures both the live plan data as well as all the scenarios or playbooks that we want to consider. We can then bring in our peers into the collaboration. So I'm bringing in my executive. Please approve alternate supply scenario. And we can post that. Whoever's been included in that collaboration will now get notification through rapid response messaging and via email. So if we now switch out to the executives login into rapid response, they will have a different dashboard applicable to their role. In this case, we've got lots of financial forecasts over the 12-month horizon, and we can see revenue, gross margin, ending inventory value, and spend. And we also have some risks quantified as well. So they can already see that, the executive can already see that there's revenue at risk in the forward time horizons. There's also a notification up here, and if we open up the notification, we can see that we've been included in a collaboration, and we can drill to that to the components of the collaboration within the notification, or we can open up the collaboration center ourselves. We can see the notes that have been posted by our planners, and we can review the specific control tower that they have submitted to us. So let's open up that control tower. So the executive can now consider the various KPIs for each playbook. They can add their own comments and analysis to the collaboration. So in this case, the executive is approving the scenario. And when they post that and we return to the planner's environment, we can see the update on the collaboration. So this control tower demonstration has shown concurrent planning in action, where we've been able to assess the impact instantly of a change in our supply or demand plans. But rapid response has automatically simulated alternate resolutions and helped the planner collaborate with their peer groups in order to take a decision quickly in order to change the plan. This is what we mean by knowing sooner, acting faster, and reducing waste.
So thank you a lot, Fraser, for the demo of rapid response. Showed us how rapid response supports concurrent planning processes and how you use scenarios to evaluate and finding the best solution. So let's come to the last agenda point of today's webinar, and let's come to the final discussion. And now everybody has the possibility to ask questions. Please, you can use your question or your chat box in the webinar tool and ask us different questions what you have. We will we will see how many questions come in and select different questions and ask to the expert, to the colleagues of Kinaxis. So to warm up a little bit, we have, let's share this with you. To warm up a little bit, I have prepared now 2 slides for you because when you did the registration, we asked you some questions, and here you see the result. Because we ask you what are the main supply chain planning challenges for your company. And your answer is very interesting because we see that you see the main challenge in encourage functional collaboration and and in more standardized planning processes. This shows that changing organization, changing processes you see as a main challenge to transform your supply chain planning. And what is also very interesting of what you answered when we ask you how you would rate your current supply chain process maturity degree. So the more than 20% of you answered that you see yourself as a follower or a catcher. So this shows how self-critical you are, and just it's interesting for the audience. So we had roughly 50 participants in the poll there. And if you have a look on the company name, so they're mostly multinational global players, who is who in DACH. So this was also very, very interesting. So let's have a look on the questions. And first question to you, Jörg. As an automotive expert, so we have seen enabling cross-functional collaboration is really an issue, and what is And what is the next step automotive companies are doing right now to improve on this topic?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for your question. Yeah, basically, I think cross-functional collaboration is definitely an organizational topic, and because you have to bring different people and different departments together. You have to align all these parties, especially in the automotive industries where you have different huge organizations and you have different interests very often. And you have to agree on common goals, first of all, for your planning process. And doing this in a meaningful way, basically each party has to know its role and its contribution for this collaboration process. So if you have a transparent and standardized process in place, and you have clear roles and clear responsibilities, you have basically a good baseline for a meaningful collaboration. And the standardized planning process should be supported, obviously, by a capable software solution to ease this process and basically, as we discussed before, to speed it up tremendously. Basically, it's much easier for an organization to have all results on the table at one certain point of time and not planning stepwise in a sequence. And this basically makes the decision much, much easier and faster. And especially in automotive industries, I see really room for improvement to speed this up and to bring everything on the table at one certain point of time.
Okay, thanks, Jörg. Now I see we have also a couple of more technical questions that will go to Kinaxis. Maybe the first question to you, Fraser. What is the difference between SAP, IBP, and Kinaxis? Maybe you answer first this, and then I will follow with the next one.
Okay, thanks, Mark. We've just seen in the demo, I guess, that what currency means when supply or demand data changes or a planner makes a change. Rapid response instantly calculates the impact of that change across the end-to-end supply chain, but it also generates new and feasible plans and orders based on that new information. SAP, however, is reliant on running an optimizer to generate the supply plan. You then typically use SAP supply and response to promise the orders based on that supply plan, which is fine so long as your orders match the forecast, which of course they don't. So if you start making changes, you no longer know that the resulting plan is actually feasible. Then the other thing is that IBP also requires that you rerun the material plan and the bomb explosion back in ECC to generate the actual orders. Whereas, of course, rapid response is running the MRP and creating the orders as the data changes within rapid response. So with SAP IBP, there's effectively 3 sequential cascaded processes there that I've just outlined, which means you still have to process, you will still have latency in the processing and in the plan. And that latency means that you can't really deliver the real-time concurrency that you need to have agile decision-making in today's supply chain.
Okay, thanks, Fraser. And yeah, let's stay at the topic SAP. This is a topic several of our the audience is very interested in. So there's one question: how the in connection to the ERP? No, it's now more about the ERP system. How the connection is, yeah. And maybe if I just gather some questions together, and maybe the connection not just SAP ERP or the other system, how this is done. And how this works.
Sure. So Rapid Response comes with its own ETL integration platform powered by Talend. which enables the bidirectional integration to a wide variety of ERP systems, cloud applications, customer APIs and ESBs, like SAP PI, for example. And so this integration layer includes SAP certified binary connectors to extract the data directly from the ERP into the rapid response integration layer, which then transforms and loads that data on typically a batch cadence into rapid response for the planning. But that integration layer also connects to SOAP-based APIs to pull data from cloud applications such as Salesforce or Teradata. And this data can be consumed and returned back to the host systems in real time, utilizing a message queuing system from Kafka. So that really is that integration layer enables both batch integration as well as real-time integration for extraction out of those data systems into rapid response, but also when rapid response has created those transfer orders, those works orders, those purchase orders, those get sent back to the transactional systems for execution.
Yeah. So thanks, Fraser, also for the last sentence, because this was also a question how that the connection is bi-directional, as both getting data for the ERP system into rapid response and sending, for example, order data back to the ERP and bring it to execution. Thanks for this. So then let's look here. Maybe this is more process question than an organizational question. This goes to you, Leonard, because Leonard, we did also a couple of projects in the medical industry. And the question is, what would be the main benefits for medical companies if they would use concurrent planning?
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So, two core application cases and benefits that I've seen, I would say, over the last 12 to 18 months. First of all is the benefit of agility when it comes to really changing customer patterns and demand patterns on the market, right? To be able to act fast and flexibly, to understand how are demands shifting within the countries, between the countries, and between the products, and to make fast analysis. What does it mean for my supply chain, for my production scheduling? That's really one. So the agility piece. And the other one, which I've seen more and more, and I think it's really interesting, is being able to do a fast simulation for tender management, where a lot of companies need to run a simulation. Okay, how much would it cost for a certain new part of the business, and how much do I have to offer for a certain tender that came in? And rapid response really allows to do a fast simulation versus spending 4 weeks on having to calculate everything in Excel tools. This really gives you a fast answer for a certain tender. How much would it cost if we fully integrate it into the supply chain? Those are the two core application cases and benefits that I've seen for the medical tech industry.
Thanks, Leonard. Let's see a look on the questions. Okay, similar we have answered. Maybe some questions to, I think this goes to Hans George. Maybe Hans George, you can answer the question: does a collaboration? How does a collaboration would work between suppliers and between my company and suppliers? Can all the suppliers work on the same platform, and how I can integrate this to work on planning scenarios?
Okay, that's a very good question. Thanks for that, Mark. So there are multiple options on how to integrate suppliers into the extended supply chain end-to-end planning enabled by concurrent planning in rapid response. First of all, we can expose certain workbooks to suppliers directly, so they can enter their commitment based on the published forecast, for example. They can see in transit, they can see their previous shipments and where they currently are in the process, given they receive permission to do so. So that's a straightforward way of integrating. Then, of course, through ERP, we can integrate also EDI messages, ASNs, for example, that get provided and issued by suppliers for our organization. So that's an automated information intake. And for sure, there are more custom ways as an option. Most organizations have a supplier portal, for example, and through that already enable some sort of collaboration. And typically we would also integrate into the supplier portal to send messages out and to share information, as well as retrieve feedback and consider this for our planning processes.
Okay. Thanks, Hans-Georg. And if I now look on the time, so I think we will close now the session on time. And so for me, it's just thank you to everybody that you participated. And if you have maybe questions or if you want to discuss, so please reach out to us. We will also in the upcoming month there will be still more events, because we think supply chain planning is really a top topic for the next years. So yes, so we would love to start to discuss with you further. So thanks a lot, and then I say goodbye for now. Bye bye.